It was one of those nights when the city looked half asleep. The air was cold enough to make anyone hurry home, and the streets of Los Angeles were nearly empty. Streetlights flickered across long stretches of road, and the occasional car passed with a soft hum. It was late, almost midnight, when Keanu Reeves left the movie set. He had spent the whole day filming a demanding scene, the kind that left even a calm person like him drained. As he drove his old, quiet car through the side streets, he rolled the window down just slightly, letting the cool air touch his face. He liked nights like this. The silence, the calm, the peace after a long day of pretending to be someone else for the camera. He didn't care much for Hollywood parties or crowded places. What he loved was solitude, those rare, quiet moments when life slowed down just enough to breathe. The road he took wasn't the main one home. It was a small detour he liked, a longer, quieter route through a neighborhood few people noticed anymore. Old buildings lined the sides, some abandoned, others still flickering with tired neon signs. There was a gas station, a closed diner, and a few stray cats darting between garbage bins. Keanu wasn't really looking for anything. He just wanted to drive and let his thoughts settle. That's when he saw it. Something small moved near a pile of trash on the side of the road. At first he thought it was just a shadow, maybe a plastic bag caught by the wind. But then, as his headlights swept over the spot, he noticed a trembling shape, an animal curled tightly into itself. He slowed down. The car tires crunched over the frosty pavement as he pulled closer. When he stopped and stepped out, the chill of the night hit him immediately. His breath came out in white clouds. He took a few steps forward, careful not to scare whatever it was. Under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, he saw it clearly. A small dog, shaking uncontrollably. Its fur was dirty, tangled, and soaked. Its ribs showed through, and it looked too weak to even lift its head properly. It tried to move when it saw him, but its legs gave out after just one step. "Hey there," Keanu said softly, kneeling down a few feet away. His voice was calm, low, the same way someone talks to a frightened child. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog didn't bark. It just looked at him with eyes that were both scared and desperate, as if it couldn't decide whether to trust him or give up. The sight broke his heart a little. He could tell it had been alone for days, maybe longer. He hesitated only for a second before unzipping his jacket and gently taking it off. He moved slowly, not wanting to startle the animal. Then he wrapped the jacket around it, lifting it carefully into his arms. The dog was lighter than he expected, frighteningly light. He could feel its bones under its thin fur. It let out a weak whimper, but didn't fight him. Maybe it was too tired to resist, or maybe it already sensed kindness. Keanu carried the dog to his car, keeping it close to his chest. He placed it on the passenger seat, adjusting his jacket so it covered most of the animal's body. Then he turned up the heater and started driving again, this time toward the nearest veterinary clinic he could find on his phone. The car was quiet except for the soft sound of the heater and the dog's slow breathing. Keanu glanced at it every few seconds, making sure it was still alive. Its eyes were half open now, watching him with a kind of fragile trust. "You're okay now," he said quietly. "Hang in there." The drive wasn't long, maybe 15 minutes, but to him it felt much longer. He kept worrying. What if it didn't make it? What if it had an owner looking for it? Or worse, what if someone had left it out there on purpose? When he finally reached the clinic, he parked quickly and rushed inside with the dog still wrapped in his jacket. The front desk nurse looked up, startled. "Please," Keanu said, a little breathless. "I found this dog outside. It's freezing. It can barely move." The nurse immediately called for the vet, who came running from the back. They took the dog from his arms gently and placed it on a small metal table. The bright light above made its frail body look even smaller. The vet started examining it right away, checking its heartbeat, temperature, and eyes. "Severe hypothermia," she said softly, "and malnourished. But it's breathing. That's a good sign." Keanu stood beside the table, his hands still cold from outside. He watched every move carefully, almost afraid to ask how bad it really was. The vet and her assistant worked quickly, placing warm blankets around the dog, inserting a small IV for fluids, and monitoring its vitals. "You can wait in the lobby if you'd like," the nurse offered. He shook his head. "No, I'll stay." So he stayed. He sat on a chair near the exam room, hands folded, eyes fixed on the little creature fighting for life just a few feet away. Every now and then, the vet gave him small updates. temperature improving, heart rate stabilizing. It was good news, but Keanu didn't relax yet. Hours passed. The city outside fell completely silent, the kind of deep quiet that only happens after midnight. The clinic lights were soft and steady, the machines around the dog beeping rhythmically. Keanu hadn't realized how long he'd been there until the nurse brought him a cup of coffee. "You've been sitting there for almost 3 hours," she said kindly. He smiled faintly. "I didn't even notice." The nurse looked at him for a moment, recognizing him now. The face from countless films, the man people called humble, grounded, and different from the usual Hollywood stars. But she didn't say anything about it. She could tell he didn't want attention. "You did the right thing," she said instead. "Most people would have just driven past." Keanu looked back at the dog. "I couldn't." As the night went on, the dog's breathing became steadier. It was finally sleeping, peacefully this time, not from exhaustion but from safety. The vet told him that if it continued to recover through the night, it would have a real chance. He nodded, relief softening his features. "Thank you," he said quietly. When the staff stepped out to prepare medication, Keanu walked closer to the small table where the dog lay wrapped in fresh blankets. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of fur away from its eyes. "You're a tough little thing, huh?" he whispered. "You held on." The dog stirred slightly, letting out a faint sound almost like a sigh. Keanu smiled. There was something about that moment, quiet, simple, human, that felt more meaningful than any applause he'd ever received. He didn't know the dog's story or where it came from, but he knew one thing: it deserved a chance. When dawn began to touch the sky with pale light, the vet returned with a small smile. "It's doing better. You can leave your contact info if you want. We'll keep you updated." He nodded, writing his number down. But before leaving, he asked if he could check on the dog one more time. "Of course," the vet said. He leaned over the table, looking at the tiny creature now sleeping more peacefully than before. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Rest." He left his jacket draped over the edge of the blanket, a small comfort for when it woke up. Then he turned and quietly walked out into the morning light. The streets were waking up now, cars starting to move again, life resuming as if nothing had happened. But for him, something had changed, something small but real. On the drive home, Keanu couldn't stop thinking about the dog's eyes. They had looked at him not just with fear, but with a strange sense of awareness, like it had wanted to tell him something. He brushed the thought aside at first, convincing himself he was just tired. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to that dog's story. He didn't know yet that the real mystery was still waiting for him, one that would lead him somewhere he never expected to go. For now, he was just glad he had stopped. Sometimes life gives us those quiet moments when we can choose to care, or to walk away. And for Keanu Reeves, that choice would soon change more lives than his own. The next morning came slow and quiet. Sunlight slipped through thin curtains in Keanu's small home, touching the corner of the room where his motorcycle helmet rested beside a half-finished cup of tea. He hadn't slept much that night. His mind kept returning to the image of that fragile dog lying on the clinic table, wrapped in his jacket. He sat by the window, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold before he realized it. Normally, mornings like this were peaceful for him, reading a bit, maybe riding through the city before anyone noticed. But not today. Today his thoughts were somewhere else. He kept wondering if the little dog had made it through the night. Finally, he picked up his phone and called the clinic. The receptionist recognized his voice right away. "Oh, good morning. The dog's doing better," she said cheerfully. "It's still weak, but it's awake now. You can come by if you want." He didn't even finish his coffee. Within half an hour, he was back on the same quiet road leading to the small veterinary clinic. The city was just beginning to wake up. People walking their dogs, kids heading to school, the smell of fresh bread coming from a nearby bakery. It all felt ordinary, but his heart was beating faster than usual. When he arrived, the nurse smiled as soon as she saw him. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't stay away," he replied softly. The vet led him to the recovery room. The dog was resting inside a small kennel, wrapped in soft blankets. Its fur had been cleaned and its eyes looked clearer now, tired but alive. When Keanu knelt down beside it, the dog tilted its head slightly as if it remembered him. "Hey there, buddy," he said. his voice warm. "You made it." The vet smiled. "You've got a strong little friend here. I think it survived thanks to you. Keanu didn't take credit. It just needed someone to stop," he said. Anyone would have done it. But the truth was, not everyone would have stopped that night. Most people might have passed by thinking it was just another stray. Yet here it was, alive, breathing because someone had cared enough to pull over. The vet adjusted the blanket and continued. "We noticed something strange when we cleaned the fur. The dog has an old collar, but it's worn down. I was going to ask if you wanted to see it." She walked over to a small tray and handed him the collar. It was a simple piece of faded leather, cracked in several places. A metal tag hung loosely from it, dull with rust. At first it didn't seem like much, just another lost dog tag. But when Keanu turned it over, his eyes narrowed. The front side had no name, no phone number. Just a faint engraving, so faint it was barely readable. He held it closer to the light and slowly made out the words, "Help me, she's still there." He frowned. "She's still there?" He read aloud softly. The vet looked at him, puzzled. "That's odd. Maybe it's an old tag from another owner." "Maybe," he said, though something about it didn't sit right. He turned the tag again and noticed what looked like an address, half rubbed off, but part of it still visible. "Is that a location?" the vet asked. "Looks like it," he said, quietly thinking. "Could this mean someone else needs help?" The vet hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe the dog belonged to someone and something happened to them." Keanu's mind started racing. He remembered how the dog had been wandering near that abandoned street, close to a row of empty buildings. It hadn't been roaming like a stray. It had looked lost, desperate, almost as if it was trying to find something. What if it ran away from that place? He asked out loud. The vet nodded slowly. "It's possible. But whatever it means, that message sounds serious." He stood there for a moment, holding the collar in his hand. The words felt heavy. He didn't know who she was, a person, another animal, maybe even the dog's owner. But the message sounded urgent, almost like a cry for help. He looked at the vet. "Can you keep taking care of it for a few more hours? I just want to check something." "Of course," she said. "We'll keep it warm and comfortable." He thanked her and stepped out into the crisp morning air. He stood by his car for a moment, the collar still in his hand. The faint engraving kept echoing in his mind. She's still there. Most people would have dismissed it, written it off as a strange coincidence. But Keanu wasn't most people. He had learned in life that sometimes the smallest signs can lead to something bigger, something that matters. He entered the partial address into his phone. The GPS showed a location not too far away, maybe a 20-minute drive. It was on the outskirts of the city, near the industrial area, where old warehouses and empty lots stretched for blocks. He hesitated for a second, then started the car. As he drove, he couldn't help but replay the night before. The image of that trembling dog, the way it had looked up at him with trust, almost like it was asking him to follow. Maybe, just maybe, this was what it had been trying to do all along. The roads grew quieter as he approached the edge of town. The buildings looked older here, windows boarded up, graffiti on the walls, signs long faded. It was the kind of place people forgot about. When he finally arrived, the GPS beeped softly. He parked by the side of a cracked sidewalk and looked around. In front of him stood an old warehouse, its front gate half collapsed, the number on the wall barely visible but matching the one from the tag. The air smelled of dust and rusted metal. A faint wind whistled through broken windows. Everything felt still, almost too still. Keanu got out of the car and walked closer, stepping carefully over scattered debris. He called out once, "Hello? Anyone here?" But no answer came. The only sound was the wind. He took another step, then paused. Something faint caught his ear. Not the wind this time, but a soft sound, almost like a whimper. He froze and listened again. It was coming from inside. He followed the sound through the open doorway, moving slowly through the dim light. Inside, dust floated in the air, and pieces of old furniture lay scattered. The sound grew clearer now, a soft, weak cry. He turned a corner and stopped. On the floor, half buried under some broken wooden boards, was a figure, an elderly woman, barely conscious. He rushed over, kneeling beside her. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said urgently. Her eyes fluttered open and she whispered something he could barely make out. Dog? He felt his heart tighten. Your dog's safe, he said quickly. It's okay. I found it, her lips trembled into a faint smile. You found him? Yes, he said. You're both going to be fine. Just stay with me. He immediately called emergency services, giving them the location. Within minutes, help was on the way. He stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, speaking softly to keep her awake. She told him in broken sentences how the roof had partially collapsed 2 days ago, trapping her. Her dog had escaped, and she had hoped someone would find him, and through him maybe find her too. When the paramedics arrived, they carefully lifted her onto a stretcher. Keanu stepped back, relief washing over him as he watched her being taken to safety. Before leaving, one of the officers turned to him. If you hadn't come here, she wouldn't have lasted another day. You probably saved her life. Keanu nodded quietly. It wasn't me, he said softly. It was the dog. Later that afternoon, he returned to the clinic. The dog was awake again, sitting up this time. When it saw him, its tail moved slightly under the blanket. He smiled and knelt beside it. I found her, he said. You did good. The dog gave a small sound, almost like a sigh of relief, and laid its head back down. For a long moment, Keanu just sat there beside it, feeling something rare and real, a connection that didn't need words. Sometimes the world hides stories like this in plain sight, small quiet acts of love and loyalty that most people never see. He reached out and gently patted the dog's head. You're a hero, you know that? The dog blinked slowly as if it understood. And in that simple, silent room, Keanu realized that the night he stopped wasn't just about rescuing an animal. It was about finding something bigger, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can ripple through the world and bring people back to life in ways we don't always expect. The following day, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds. Keanu sat in his car outside the small animal clinic, watching raindrops slide slowly down the windshield. He had barely slept again, but this time it wasn't worry keeping him awake. It was thought. Everything that had happened in the last 24 hours still felt unreal. He had gone out for a quiet drive and ended up rescuing a freezing dog. That alone would have been enough to shake most people. But then there was the strange message on the collar, the faint engraving that had led him to an old warehouse and to a woman who might not have survived another night without help. Now, as he sat there listening to the soft sound of the rain, he couldn't stop thinking about the two of them, the woman and the dog, their connection, their struggle, the loyalty that had somehow brought them back together. He finally stepped out of the car and went inside the clinic. The warmth of the room greeted him, along with the familiar faces of the staff. You're back again, the nurse said with a smile. Yeah, he replied. Couldn't stay away. She led him to the recovery room where the dog was resting. It looked stronger today, sitting upright, tail wagging slowly when it saw him. The sight made him smile without even realizing it. Hey, look at you, he said softly, crouching beside the kennel. You're getting better. The vet entered the room just then, wiping her hands with a towel. He's healing faster than I expected, she said. Good food, warmth, and maybe a little love seem to be doing wonders. Keanu chuckled. Guess he's got plenty of that here. The vet tilted her head slightly. You know, the woman you found, she's been asking about you. She's stable now, recovering at the hospital nearby. His expression softened. That's good to hear. How's she doing? She's weak but alert. Said she'd like to thank you in person. He hesitated for a moment. He never liked the attention that came with doing something kind. But this was different. This wasn't about fame or news or cameras. It was about two lives that had crossed paths for a reason. He nodded. All right, I'll visit her. A few hours later, Keanu walked down the quiet hospital corridor, carrying a small bag of food for the dog. Something he thought she might like to see when she got better. The nurse at the desk guided him to a room near the end of the hallway. The room was small and plain but bright. The woman lay in bed, her hands resting on a blanket, her eyes half closed until she heard the door open. When she saw him, she smiled weakly. You're the man who found me, she said softly. He nodded. I just happened to be there. She shook her head. No, you were meant to be there. He pulled a chair closer and sat down beside her. How are you feeling? Better, she whispered. The doctor said another night and I might not have made it. I owe you more than I can say. You don't owe me anything, he replied gently. You just had someone who didn't give up on you. At that, her eyes glistened. My dog, she said, is he okay? He's fine, Keanu said quickly, smiling. Strong little guy. The vets are taking good care of him. I've been checking in every day. Tears filled her eyes. I knew he'd find someone. He's smart, you know. Brave too. I can tell, Keanu said quietly. He led me to you. The woman looked down at her hands, her voice trembling as she spoke. We've been together for years. I found him when he was a puppy, abandoned near the same warehouse. I was going through hard times then. Lost my job, lost my home. That old place became our shelter. It wasn't much, but it was ours. He kept me company through everything. He was my only family. Keanu listened silently, his heart heavy but warm at the same time. When the roof fell, she continued, I couldn't move. I told him to run to find help. I didn't think he'd understand, but he did. He ran out into the cold. I prayed someone kind would see him. Her voice broke slightly. I made that collar tag years ago. I didn't have much, but I had this idea that if something ever happened, he could lead someone back to me. I never thought it would actually work. Keanu looked at her, speechless for a moment. The simple piece of metal that had seemed so strange before now carried an entire story. One of hope, loyalty, and love. He did exactly what you hoped, Keanu said softly. He didn't give up on you. The woman smiled faintly. And you didn't give up on him. For a long while, the room was quiet except for the hum of the hospital machines. There was something peaceful in that silence, a kind of unspoken understanding between two people who didn't really know each other, yet shared something real. Before leaving, Keanu promised her he'd bring the dog to visit as soon as the vet allowed it. Her eyes lit up at that, a spark of happiness breaking through her tiredness. That evening, as he drove home, Keanu couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said, about how even in her darkest moment, she had trusted that her dog would find help. It was that kind of faith, quiet but strong, that reminded him of why small acts of kindness mattered. A few days later, when the dog was well enough to walk again, the vet smiled and said, he's ready for a reunion. Keanu helped load the little dog into his car, wrapping it gently in a new blanket. On the way to the hospital, the dog sat beside him, nose pressed against the window, watching the city pass by. When they reached the hospital room, the woman was sitting up this time, looking stronger. As soon as she saw the dog, she gasped softly and held out her arms. The dog immediately recognized her. Its tail wagged wildly, and it let out a sound that was half bark, half cry. Keanu helped it onto the bed, and the reunion that followed was something words could barely describe. The dog nuzzled her face, licking her hands, whining with joy. She laughed through tears, holding it close as if she would never let go again. You see? She said, looking up at Keanu with grateful eyes. He found his way back. Keanu smiled. He did. He's got a good heart. The hospital staff stood by the door, watching the moment quietly. Even the nurses had tears in their eyes. It was a simple scene. An old woman and her dog reunited, but it carried a weight that everyone in the room could feel. Before Keanu left, the woman reached out her hand. Thank you, she said. Not just for saving us, but for believing that it was worth stopping. He squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes, he said, you just have to listen when life whispers at you. She smiled, nodding. You've got a kind soul. The world needs more of that. He didn't know what to say. Compliments always made him uncomfortable, but in that moment he felt something rare. A quiet sense of purpose. Over the next few weeks, he checked on them regularly. The woman slowly regained her strength, and with Keanu's help, arrangements were made for her to move into a small assisted living home, where she and her dog could stay together safely. He covered part of the expenses quietly without telling her. The staff at the facility later said they often saw him visit, sitting in the garden, talking softly while the dog lay at his feet. He never made it public, never mentioned it in interviews, never sought credit. It was simply something he did because it felt right. One afternoon, as he sat with the woman and her dog under a blooming tree, she looked at him with a calm smile. You know, she said, I used to think the world forgot about people like me. But that night when my dog didn't come back, I prayed that someone good was still out there. And then you showed up. Keanu looked down, gently scratching the dog behind the ear. He was the one who found me first, he said. She chuckled softly. Then maybe kindness finds kindness. He smiled, nodding slowly. Maybe she was right. Maybe life had a way of connecting people who still believed in compassion, even when the world seemed too busy to notice. As the sun began to set, the light turned golden, wrapping everything in a soft glow. The woman sat quietly, the dog resting beside her, and for the first time in a long time, Keanu felt something he couldn't quite name. Peace, maybe. Or gratitude. He realized then that what had started as a simple act of kindness had become something far bigger, a reminder that even small moments can ripple through lives, connecting hearts in ways no one expects. And though he would go on with his work and his quiet life, that night the cold street, the freezing dog, the faint engraving on a collar, would stay with him forever, like a quiet promise to always stop when someone or something needed help. A week had passed since Keanu had brought the woman and her dog back together. Life seemed to settle again, but something inside him still felt unfinished. The story wasn't over, not yet. He couldn't stop thinking about the warehouse, the cold, and the faint message on that collar that had led him there. It felt like there was still something left behind, a missing piece of the story that he needed to understand. That morning, Los Angeles was quiet, under a soft blanket of fog. The streets glistened with moisture from a light drizzle earlier. Keanu sat at his kitchen table, sipping black coffee, staring at the small leather collar lying in front of him. He had asked the vet to let him keep it for now, and it sat there, worn and cracked, a symbol of everything that had unfolded. He turned it over in his hands, tracing the engraved words with his thumb. "Help me. She's still there." Those few words had changed 2 lives. But now he wondered who had made them, how they were carved, and if maybe there was something more hidden behind them. He finished his coffee, grabbed his jacket, and decided to visit the warehouse again. When he arrived, the fog was just beginning to lift. The building stood the same, old, tired, and silent. The metal door creaked as he pushed it open, stepping inside with slow, careful steps. The air was damp and cold, carrying a faint smell of rust and dust. Shafts of sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, lighting up patches of the floor. He looked around quietly. The rescue team had cleared most of the fallen debris after saving the woman, but some of her old belongings were still scattered in the corner. A small chair, a torn blanket, a few books stacked neatly against the wall. It was strange how even in a place so broken there was a sense of warmth, a trace of someone's life. He crouched down and picked up one of the books. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed. Inside he found handwritten notes in the margins, small, thoughtful words that spoke about hope, faith, and gratitude. She must have written them during her quiet nights here. As he flipped through the pages, something fell out, a small photograph. He picked it up and looked closely. It was the woman, years younger, standing beside a man in front of the same warehouse, smiling. The dog was just a puppy then, sitting at her feet. They all looked happy, peaceful, like a family. He stood there for a long time, holding the photo, before tucking it safely into his jacket pocket. Just then, a faint sound echoed from the far side of the warehouse, a metallic rattle like something shifting. He turned toward the sound. The building was large and mostly empty now, but curiosity made him walk toward it. When he reached the corner, he found a small hidden door behind a pile of wooden crates. The door was half broken and led to a narrow space that looked like an old storage area. He pushed it open, and the smell of old wood and dust filled the air. Inside were a few old boxes, some tools, and a large metal trunk. He wiped the top of the trunk clean and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were dozens of papers, letters, documents, and small trinkets. It looked like the woman had kept memories here, hidden away. He sat on the ground and began to go through them slowly. There were letters written in neat handwriting, some addressed to family members, others to people he didn't recognize. The more he read, the clearer the story became. Years ago, the woman and her husband had owned a small repair business nearby. But after her husband passed away, things had started to fall apart. She had tried to keep the business running, but debt and bad luck eventually forced her out. With nowhere else to go, she had come back to the warehouse, the only place that still felt like home. Among the letters was one that caught his attention. It was addressed to whoever finds this. The paper was yellowed and slightly torn, but the writing was clear. It read, "I don't know who will ever see this. If someone finds it, please take care of my dog. His name is Blue. He's all I have left. If he's still alive, it means I didn't give up. And if you're reading this, maybe you were kind enough to help us. Please know that kindness never disappears. It always finds its way back." Keanu read the words twice, feeling something tighten in his chest. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the trunk. He sat there for a moment, surrounded by silence, thinking about how much one person and one animal could endure. And still, somehow choose hope. He looked around once more, making sure nothing important would be left behind. Then he stood and took a deep breath. The warehouse, for all its emptiness, felt different now. Not sad, but peaceful, like it had finally told its story. On his way out, he called the woman at the care home. Her voice was still a little weak, but warm as ever. "You went back there, didn't you?" she asked gently. He smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah, I found some of your things. Old letters, photos." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't think any of that would still be there. The roof gave in and I thought everything was lost." "They're safe," he said. "I'll bring them to you." When he visited her later that afternoon, he brought the small trunk with him. She looked at it in disbelief, tears filling her eyes as she opened it slowly. Her hands trembled as she touched the letters, the books, the photo. "These were my memories," she whispered. "I thought the world had taken them all away." Keanu sat quietly beside her while she went through the box. The dog lay curled at her feet, tail wagging every time she spoke. It was a quiet moment, but it carried the kind of peace only found after years of struggle. After a while, she looked up at him. "You know," she said, "I spent so many years thinking I had nothing left. But that night you found my dog, it felt like life was giving me one more chance. Maybe that's what we're all waiting for, a second chance." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes all it takes is one moment. One person stopping to care," she smiled. "And sometimes it's one loyal heart that refuses to give up." She reached down and stroked the dog's head gently. "He never left me. Even when I couldn't move, I knew he'd come back." They sat together for a long time, not saying much. Outside, the sky had turned golden as the sun began to set. Light poured into the room through the window, landing softly on the woman's face and the dog's fur. Before leaving, Keanu helped her place the trunk on a small shelf beside her bed. "You can start fresh," he said quietly. "But you don't have to forget where you came from." She nodded. "No," she said softly, "because it's part of who I am." On his drive home that evening, Keanu couldn't help but think about how strange life was, how something as simple as stopping for a stray dog could unfold into a story of survival, faith, and love. He didn't see it as a coincidence anymore. Maybe the universe had its own quiet way of connecting people who needed each other. That night, as he sat in his living room, the collar still on his table, he felt grateful, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the reminder that compassion still mattered. He decided he would help the woman rebuild her life as quietly as possible. Maybe find a way to help her get a small home again, somewhere safe for her and Blue. He didn't want her to know it was him arranging it. He just wanted her to have peace. As he looked at the collar one last time before turning off the lights, he whispered to himself, "You did good, Blue. You brought her home." And somewhere in the quiet of the night, he knew that even the smallest act of kindness could echo longer than anyone might imagine. The days after the reunion felt calm, almost like life had taken a gentle breath. For Keanu, everything seemed to move slower now. The noise of movie sets, flashing cameras, and the endless rhythm of city life felt distant. His mind kept returning to that small room in the care home. The old woman's smile, the way her dog wagged his tail whenever she whispered his name, and the peace that finally rested on her face after years of hardship. He had promised himself he would help quietly, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because it simply felt right. That morning he sat by the window with a cup of tea, the collar resting beside him on the table once again. He traced the engraved words, "Help me, she's still there." He smiled faintly. That message had brought him to her, had led to something far deeper than a rescue. It had reminded him of something he'd nearly forgotten. That kindness didn't need to be big or loud. Sometimes it only needed to be real. Later that week, he called one of his close friends who managed a small housing charity in Los Angeles. Together, they started looking for a quiet, cozy place the woman could call her own. Somewhere safe, warm, and surrounded by life. They didn't tell her right away. Keanu wanted it to be a surprise. Over the next few days, they found a small cottage on the edge of town. It wasn't large or fancy, but it had a small garden and a big window that looked out onto the hills. The moment Keanu stepped inside, he could already picture her sitting by the window, her dog lying peacefully beside her. It felt perfect. He quietly handled the paperwork and asked the charity to say it was a donation from an anonymous supporter. He didn't want her to feel indebted to him. He just wanted her to have a home again, a real one this time. A week later, he visited her again at the care home. She looked healthier, brighter. The dog, Blue, was curled up in her lap, sleeping peacefully. "You look better," he said, smiling as he entered the room. "I feel better," she replied softly. "It's funny how quickly life can change when someone shows up at the right time." He nodded, not knowing what to say. She looked at him for a moment, studying his face as if she could see through his calm expression. "You've done more than you think," she said quietly. "I can tell you're not used to people thanking you too much, but I want you to know I'm grateful." He smiled again, a little embarrassed. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just focus on getting stronger." "I will," she replied. "But I hope you'll visit sometimes." Blue gets excited every time he hears footsteps down the hall. "He thinks it's you," he chuckled. "I'll visit. I promise." The following week, the arrangements were ready. The charity called her to tell her she'd been approved for housing assistance. She cried when they told her about the cottage. Keanu was there quietly in the background, watching as she packed her few belongings, mostly the books, the letters, and the photograph of her husband she had kept for so many years. When they arrived at the new home, she stepped out of the car slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. The afternoon sun was golden and the gentle wind carried the smell of flowers from a nearby garden. "Is this really for me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Yes," Keanu said simply. "It's all yours." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just live." She walked slowly through the little house, her hand brushing along the walls as if she was afraid it might disappear. Blue followed her closely, wagging his tail so hard it thumped against the furniture. When she reached the living room window, she stopped and looked out at the hills in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Keanu stood beside her, quietly watching. After a while, she turned to him. "You know, I spent so many nights thinking the world had forgotten me. But then a stranger stopped to help my dog. And now this." He looked at her gently. "Maybe the world didn't forget. Maybe it was just waiting for the right moment to remind you you're still part of it." She smiled through her tears. "Maybe so." Before leaving, Keanu placed a small box on her kitchen counter. "Something to remind you of the journey," he said. When she opened it after he left, she found the old collar, cleaned and restored, polished until it looked new again. Attached to it was a small silver tag engraved with two simple words, "Home again." That evening, she sat in her armchair with Blue resting on her lap, the collar in her hand. The sunset bathed the room in warm light, and for the first time in years, she felt at peace. Keanu drove home quietly that night, the streets glowing under the city lights. The radio played softly, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about how everything had started, just a freezing dog on the side of the road. One moment of compassion had unraveled into something so meaningful, it almost felt like fate. He didn't tell anyone about it. Not the press, not his friends, not even the crew members on his next movie set. It wasn't that he wanted to hide it. He just believed that some stories didn't need to be shared with the world. Some moments were sacred because they belonged only to the people who lived them. Weeks later, while filming on location, he received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, careful and slightly shaky. It was from her. The letter read, "Dear friend, I still don't know how to thank you for what you've done. Every morning I wake up to the sound of birds outside my window and Blue snoring beside me. I make tea, sit by the window and watch the light change across the hills. For the first time in years, I don't feel lost. You gave me back my home. Not just the walls and roof, but the feeling of being safe again. I hope you know that what you did wasn't small. It was everything. With love, a grateful heart." He folded the letter carefully and placed it on his desk. It stayed there for months. A quiet reminder that real goodness didn't need recognition. Sometimes, He would think about how many people passed by that same street every night. How many might have seen the dog but kept driving. It wasn't judgment, just reflection. He realized how fragile moments were, how easily the chance to help could be missed. One night he went for a walk. The air was cool and the stars were clear above the city. He passed people hurrying home, a couple laughing outside a cafe, a man sitting on the curb with a cardboard sign asking for food. Keanu stopped, walked into a nearby shop, bought 2 sandwiches and handed one to the man without saying much. The man looked up, surprised, then smiled softly. "Thanks," he said. Keanu just nodded. "Take care, all right?" As he walked away, he felt the same quiet warmth that had filled him since that winter night, the feeling that kindness, no matter how small, could ripple through the world in ways you might never see. The next morning, his assistant told him a small story that made him smile. A local news station had covered a piece about a rescued woman and her dog, who were now living peacefully thanks to an anonymous donor. The reporter had tried to uncover who helped her, but no one knew. He laughed quietly and shook his head. That was how he wanted it. The story belonged to her now. In the years that followed, he kept in touch with her through letters. She sent photos of Blue sitting proudly in their garden, a little older but still full of life. Every message carried warmth and gratitude, but the last one stood out most. It read, "Life gave me another chance because someone chose kindness when it was easier to walk away. I hope you always remember that one small act can change everything, not just for others but for your own heart too." Keanu kept that letter framed on his shelf. Whenever people asked him why he always stopped for strangers, why he still rode the subway, why he lived so quietly despite fame, he would just smile and say, "Because you never know when someone needs a little light." And maybe, somewhere in that quiet truth, was the real ending of the story. Not about a famous actor or a rescued dog, but about what it means to still believe in the simple power of being human.